For your poetry and grid exercise. I have open here the template, which you can find in this week's module. And right now I'm on the very first page. I'm going to go ahead and open up my pages panel, and you can see there are multiple pages. There's also a couple different master pages, and I have my work environment set to typography. You can change that right here, and I would definitely keep it to typography. On each page you will find instructions as to what you can do and what I want you to explore using this established grid. The grid itself is on the master page, so you could change it if you wanted to, but I want you to start by working with this grid and not change it unless you're going to do additional pages. The second master page, the B, does not have a grid on it, and that's the very last step. You'll be practicing with that once you've completed your first pages. It is really important that you come down and you double click on your pages over here to ensure that you are on a page and not designing on your master pages. So make sure you stay down here. And the first thing I want you to do is read the instructions. Once you've read them, you can then delete them to start designing. And I'm going to give you some tips on how you can work on each of these pages. So on this page, the first two pages, only thing you can use is type and black and white to create your layout. You're going to use this copy right down here, which is an excerpt from Amanda Gorman's In This Place, an American Lyric, her poem. So you're going to be using this copy, and you're going to create a dynamic layout using only type and only black and white. Everything else, nothing else is allowable, but you can do anything you want to the type, meaning you can use scale, you could use orientation, you can repeat, you could use placement. All these things you can do. You cannot distort the type. And if you're working in this grid, I want you to think of each one of these modules as little frames that if you go into the next one, you want to go fully into the one after it, and you want to keep these gutters open unless you're combining multiple modules. So you're going to use each one of these little modules. You have to create a frame in which to place elements. You can see it's going to snap to that grid. And if you're going to go into a second module or a third module or a fourth, I want you to go all the way through it, but I do want you to keep these things in the center that are called gutters open. They allow for negative space in your design, and they really help you establish a structure for your layout. So once you've read this, you can go ahead and delete it. I'm going to delete that off. I'm also going to come in here, I'm going to highlight it, and I'm going to copy it. I'm also going to delete that off. Now, I need to build a frame of some kind to start. So I'm just going to go ahead and grab my type tool, and I'm going to drop a frame in here that goes across 3 modules and down 3 modules. And I'm going to Command V to paste that in there. First thing I could just do is simply play with scale. One way I can change the type, I can also change the typeface, so you have a lot to choose from up here. I'm going to go ahead and just keep it as is for now, but you are welcome to use any typeface you want. If I want to change the scale of it, I can do it this way by clicking it up. I can also choose from the drop down right here. And additionally, I'm going to show you another trick. You can take, with it selected, you can hold down Shift, Command, and you can use your greater than or lesser than to bump it up in size as well. So I'm using my greater than, and I can also use my lesser than to bring it back down. So that's just a nice little trick. Also, when you're in this text frame, and I've talked about that quite a bit with some of you about aligning your type. So obviously right now we have it the standard alignment, which is left. We can also center it. We can also align to the right. We could justify it, and you might be like, well, that didn't do anything. And that's because I have returns after each one of these sentence or fragments of a sentence. So only way I can really justify it is if I justify all lines. And I'm not sure that's what I really want to do. It is quite poetic. Of course, you can always do Shift W to see how it's going to look, but I probably would not want to do it. You can just hit Escape to get out of that. So I'm going to Command Z to undo that and bring it back to this alignment. Another thing I wanted for sure to show you is that within that frame, you also have text frame options. So that you get to by going to Object, Text Frames Options, or it's also Command B, which is generally what I'm going to be doing. So I'm going to go Command B. Now you get into this sub menu where you can see, you can create columns. You can also use fixed, so you could add columns, or probably more what you're going to use is this inset spacing, which basically creates a little margin within your frame. So I'm going to go ahead and click up, and it's going to bump it up to 0.0625 inch. And you can now see there's a frame, a little force field, a little margin within that frame. If this chain is not intact, it would only do it to the top or to the bottom, whichever one I was choosing. So I'm going to Command Z. Actually, we'll go back to put it back to 0. If I untick this, then I can choose to just do it to the top. Or again, if I have it intact, then it'll do it to all of them. All right. One other thing I want to show you while you're in here, let's bring that down just a little bit, is you can also choose your alignment. Here we have it aligned to the top. I can toggle this open. I can say to the center. I can also say to the bottom, or I can justify it, which I think looks really nice, doesn't it? And then you can also justify it, which is going to evenly spread out the lines within that frame. So I'm going to go ahead and put it back down to the bottom because I like the way that looked, and just say OK. Another thing I definitely wanted to show you, and I'm going to move this out of the way, I'll drop it up here in the upper right, is vertical type. And that could be a little bit tricky in InDesign. Vertical type, you need to use your Type on a Path tool, which is here underneath your Type tool. And you also have to have a path. So first I'm going to draw a line. I'm going to draw it right here on this gutter, and I'm going to hold Shift. We'll make it kind of long for no reason other than to draw it out. Okay? Now I'm going to grab my Type on a Path tool, and I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to type the word hope. H-O-P-E. I do recommend using all caps for this because it aligns better. That is nice, but that's not really what I wanted. I wanted it to stack. So now I have to go to Type on Path Options. I need to open this up, and instead of rainbow, I'm going to choose to do stair step. And that's going to stack it for me. And you can see in here, I can also align to the baseline or the center, which is generally what I pick. Center. I could flip it. I could have it go from the bottom up, but I'm going to go ahead and leave it the way it was. I'm just going to, and if you don't have preview ticked, you're not going to see it. So make sure this little box is ticked. And I'm going to go OK. Now that's not really that good looking because it's really hard to see. And I've got that darn line in the center, and I don't want that. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to highlight this again. Whoops. Sorry, got a little out of control there. I'm going to select this, and I'm going to come up here and I'm going to say no stroke to get rid of that. But I also do need to adjust my tracking here, which can be done either by, you don't want to do this one, sorry, I clicked on the wrong one. You want to go ahead and do your tracking, which is here. So we're going to have to go and bump that up to give it more space. Now you'll notice there's something, okay, that looks kind of good except for this darn E is in the wrong spot, right? We want it to be centered. So I'm going to go ahead and do a little sneaky sneak that you have to do. It's a glitch I think they should fix. But in order to get that last letter to line up, I need to add in a ghost letter. So I'm going to go ahead and put a capital O in there. And you're like, well, that now says Hopio. We don't want that. I'm just going to highlight that, and I'm going to tell it to be paper color. So it's putting no ink on it, so it's going to hide it. Okay, let's see, what else was I going to show you? Also, with a frame, here we have a text frame, we can put a border on it, which can be just simple stroke, but you can also toggle this open and you can find that there are different borders available and you can change the weight of them. You can also even use something like dots, and when you change the scale of that, it increases the size of the dot. And you want it really little, you can do 0.25. Barely noticeable as dots, but it is there. All right, the other thing I wanted to show you as you advance through this, so your first two are just using black and white and type. When you get to the third option, you get to start using color. And to use color, you can drop color into a frame, and you can create different shapes to be by either using your frame tool or your ellipse tool. I'm sorry, your rectangle tool or your ellipse tool, or you can actually just use your frame tool and it works the same. To put a color in there, you literally just click here. If you want to change that color, you can go ahead and double click, just like an Illustrator, to get into your color picker. So I could pick whatever I want. I could say that color, and then I can also play with opacity. So if I want some of it to show through like I had it before, I can play with the opacity. And additionally, I changed the color of the type here, and again, you're going to delete these instructions. You're going to do 2 pages with color. Additionally, just like in Illustrator, everything is on layers, right? So if I wanted to turn one off, I can turn it off here. If I really want this on the very back, I can drag it down. The last thing I wanted to show you is how you can put in an image, which is what you get to here. So you can add images. So I have one here. If I want to swap that out, I can just double click to delete it. I still have a circular frame there, and I'm going to go ahead and go Command D, which is place, and I'm just going to drop this image into there, one that I already loaded. I'm going to add that in there, and that looks pretty great. I could play with my fitting up here. You also get to that by right-clicking or control-clicking on it to get to your fitting options. So I could say fit content proportionally. That's what's going on, except it wasn't. It was filling the frame proportionately. So I'm going to do that again. Control-click and go fitting. I'm going to say fill frame proportionately. Or I could choose to zoom it in more by double-clicking, and I'm holding Shift and Control and at the same time. I'm sorry, Shift and Option at the same time to change the scale of that. So I want to remind you that a frame determines what you see of that image. So you can see the image is this much bigger than what is in the frame. Then I can also do something pretty cool with this, although it's not going to be that effective, but we'll see it at least in theory, and you could then apply it. I'm going to bring this over here, and that's a little problematic, right? We don't really want that type behind this image. Even if we change the opacity of this image, it's still going to be a little bit hard, although that's kind of pretty, but we're seeing the yellow through. It's not what I want. Instead, I want the type to wrap around it, and so that's using a text wrap. So I can select this, I can select this type actually, and I can say I want you to, here's your text wrap here. You also have a window text wrap right here. It's also over here in your panels. So most of these things can be found in lots of different places. And I'm going to go ahead and say I want it to text wrap around the bounding box or around an object shape. And that should have it do it. Let's see, why didn't we do it? Just like this, there we go. Get it to text wrap around the shape, but I really want it around the bounding box. So I'm going to have it work a little bit better, and I'm going to have to play around with my alignment to make this actually look very effective. So I'm going to go in here, and instead I'm going to justify it, all lines. And you can see it's starting to be a little fickle, but that's where you found it. And you can see moving it around, it's recognizing the shape, and it's having the text wrap around it. So there we have it. If this was denser type, it would be more effective. So I think I've given you everything I wanted to give you in this tutorial. I mostly want to encourage you to have fun. And again, when you get to each of these pages, you want to delete those instructions off. And the very last, this is the last thing. On this last page, there is no grid. I want you to just have fun and do something more experimental and just see what happens and how you feel about working without a grid now that you've been working with one. And additionally, you could put in your own grid by coming up here to the master pages to add a grid as well. Most important thing at the very end of this, when you're done, you want to go ahead and go File. You want to save first, and you're going to name it with your last name, first name, and then you also want to go File, and you want to package it, which is down here. And once you do that, it will include a PDF that you can upload to the assignment. And then you're also going to submit this to a showcase. You're going to pick your 3 to 5 favorites, and you're going to go here to export those as either a PNG or a JPEG is what's going to work for the discussions. And you can go save, and then you can insert a range. So instead of all pages, which is probably what you're going to want to do, and then you just put in the ones you want, you could put in a range instead. I'm going to say cancel. All right, and as always, just reach out as needed. I am always just an inbox away. Bye.